Hi, this is Kevin. Welcome to my tutorial for exercise 1 of the coding assignment for Severance chapter 14. And in exercise 1, we're going to be creating a data holder class using the data classes feature. And in either most or all of the exercises that we're doing, I'm going to be giving you the tutorial code. So here's the download that we're going to have for this coding assignment. Okay, so I've got all the tutorial programs here. I've got all the data files and all that kind of stuff. And the first thing that we're going to be working on for exercise 1 is we're going to be using a class called a module called my states that has a class in it called states. Okay. Now you could do one of two things. You could copy this right into your program. That's not what I'm going to do. Or you could do what I'm going to do, which is I'm going to open this with some other text editor. In this case, on the Mac, so I'm using Sublime Text. Okay, so this is the code. And what I'm going to do is, instead of having you type it in, I'm going to recommend that you open it in another editor and you build it along with me by copying and pasting. Okay, so to do that, I'm going to put that on my other monitor and I'm going to create a new Python file that is going to be called mystates.py. Of course, you don't have to put the .py in. Okay, and so let's look at this. Now, you may recognize this. I used this same example in my tutorial for the coding assignment for Zell chapter 11, but I've made some improvements. So definitely use the code that I'm showing here, even if it looks familiar. Okay, so let's get the module started. Okay, so up in the top, we're going to put a doc string that says module. It contains the state class and related test code. We're going to make this a data class using the data classes feature that was created in Python 3.7 and has been improved in, well, there are even improvements coming along in Python 3.10. This is not discussed in either of our textbooks because I think our textbooks were written when the current Python that was out was either Python 3.5 or Python 3.6. And so that's the reason that these features are not covered in our text at all. Okay, so we're going to import a data class from data classes, and we're going to use this unit test helpers module that I've been developing over the course of the current semester, spring 2022. And again, I'd like you to use the version of it that's in your download of starter files because I keep improving it every week and I want you to have the latest version. Okay? All right, so let's take a look at the class. We're just going to put all the code in for the class all at one time. Okay, we skipped 2 lines because you do that before a class. And we have this annotation data class. That's what turns on the data class's magic. And I can see that I don't have IS430 unit test helpers. It's in my starter files, but I'm going to need to copy it and paste it into my project. And when I paste it in, if I go back to my states, well, that problem has cleared. And, you know, we've already seen these data classes features when I created and showed this not long ago. But so we've got 3 instance variables for the state class. State name is a string. Land area in square miles is a float. Water area in square miles is a float. And I think I had a mistake in these back in the last time I showed this. I accidentally had said that they were ints. It worked okay anyway, but we should have proper documentation. And of course, there's a doc string for the class. So the doc string says a class used to represent a state. And there is a method, calculate total area in square miles, and it returns the sum of the instance variable land area in square miles, which is called self.land area in square miles, plus the instance variable water area in square miles. And because those are both floats, it's going to return a float. And this method has a doc string in which it says calculates total area in square miles. And I think we should have a blank line here, if I'm right. And then we want to say that it returns total area in square miles as a float. Okay? So the only change that we made in there was to introduce the blank line in the doc string. For some reason, the doc string processors that are used to generate documentation like to have a blank line on the second line. Okay? All right, so this is pretty straightforward. I want to emphasize again that the reason why we have a method for calculate total area in square miles is that there's a good practice that says that we don't store data that can be derived from other data that we are storing. So because we're storing both land area in square miles and water area in square miles, we don't store the total area in square miles as an instance variable. Rather, we create a method for our convenience. These are often called convenience methods that will do the calculation for us. And that not only makes it convenient, but we know that because we've provided the method and we're expecting all of the users of our class to use it, that it's going to be calculated the same way across all of our applications. And of course, for this one, it's a pretty simple calculation. So you might make the argument, well, we don't really need to do that, but it's a good practice and it's something that I want you to do. Okay, so we don't store data generally that can be calculated from other data that we store. We do that to save space, plus we don't want the potential for conflicting data facts. Okay, so if we only store the minimum set and we calculate the rest, we're never going to store contradicting information. And we save some space. Okay, now, how are we going to unit test this? Well, let's bring over some of the Unicode. We create a main, okay? And I'm just going to bring over all the unit testing code because there's only so much of it. And then we'll talk our way through that, okay? So we skip 2 lines after the class state, and then we have a main function, and we're putting our unit test into main. And I want to emphasize again that not everybody does this. That professional programmers use established unit testing frameworks that we don't really have the time or the energy to learn in an introductory course. So we're using the principles of those kind of frameworks. And so the best kind of implementation for that for our course is put our unit test code for these shareable modules into main. And if you look here, we've got 2 unit test cases, one where we test the constructor and one where we test the method calculate total area in square miles. So I don't want to run the test for the method yet. I'm going to toggle those into a comment. So now I've just got the unit test for the constructor. And I began to follow kind of a better practice that I'd like you to adopt in your unit testing in these kinds of modules, which is to say, if we've got a group of variables that we're setting up in order to use them as expected values in several unit test cases, we're going to collect them up and define them only once, and then have a comment like common variables for state class unit tests. Okay, and you'll notice that in both of these unit tests, I'm not reassigning the values to the variables. And this leaves a little bit less code, and it generates fewer errors from Python, and I think it's a generally good practice. Okay, so the variables that we're going to set up are expected state name, which we're going to have be Alaska, expected land area in square miles, and we've got a value. I forget whether this was taken from our data or not. Expected water area in square miles, we've got a value here. And then we've got to test the constructor. I've improved the variable name set I'm using. So instead of S1, I've started to use state1. That's a little bit more consistent with the variable names that we've been using in our course. And so we call the constructor, okay, and we pass in name, land area in square miles, water area in square miles, okay. Now, we don't define a constructor ourselves because it's generated for us by the data class's magic. But the constructor that gets generated has the fields occurring in the same order that we list them up here in the beginning of the data class. So since we listed them state name, land area, water area, if you look at the constructor, it takes them in the same order. All right. And then we're using this assert equal from the unit test helpers in order to compare the expected values for state name, land area, and water area to the values that are actually in the state object that we have constructed, the instance of state. Okay, so we check those three values. And again, at the very bottom, this is one of the few cases that I actually use this. If dunder name equal dunder main, then call main. I only use it in cases where we have a module that we're going to be importing into other programs. So yes, I want to run the main if we're doing a unit test of this module, but no, I don't want to run main if we're importing it into the program that's going to use this module by importing it. Okay, so let's give this a run. Okay, and we can see here's the name of our test case, test constructor, and we called 3 assert equals, and we got pass, pass, pass. So that looks terrific. And so I think it's important for us to test the constructor. It's not something that we coded, but it's a very important feature of the data class. And so I think we need to demonstrate that it works. And the way that we do that is that we construct an instance and then we make sure that we're able to retrieve the values from the instance variables. Okay? And then the other thing that we need to test is the method which we actually did code ourselves, calculate total area in square miles. Okay, and so we have a value here. I think I probably added these two together with a calculator. Okay, and then I called the next, I decided that I wanted to create a separate instance each time that I wanted to assign to a separate variable. So I called this one state 2, whereas in the previous test case I'd use state 1. And I construct it again. Okay, it's going to have the same values as the last one that I constructed because I haven't changed the expected values that I used to create it with. But then I call assert equal float in order to compare the expected total area in square miles to the value that we get when we call that method on state 2. And I use the convention of having the acceptable error be essentially 1/10 of a cent. Okay, 0.001. Okay, and let's give this a run. And that passed as well. Okay, so in a case where the method we're calling only really needs one test case because we're just adding it, and adding it is adding. There are no boundary values to test or anything like that. Well, so we just have a test case for the constructor and one for the method, and then we're done. Okay. So it's that simple. Okay. You're going to do a similar class in your coding assignment exercise, and I recommend that you use this as the model. Okay. So I'm going to go let you do that, and I'm going to say bye until next time. Bye bye.